A very, very good evening to all those who have joined us on the Zoom platform, as well as those who have joined us on Facebook Live. A very good evening to all of you on behalf of the Victoria Memorial Hall. You all know that today is the 18th of April, and this date has been designated by the UNESCO as the International Day for Monuments and Sites. And Victoria Memorial Hall every year on this particular day does some program related to the celebration of the day as well as the theme for that particular year. This also being the centenary year of Victoria Memorial Hall, it is a kind of double delight for us to be able to welcome all of you here. And on this particular evening, we shall hear from Dr. Shikha Jain, who will be speaking on the challenges of UNESCO inscriptions for an Indian city, learning from Jaipur. Before we hand over the microphone to Dr. Jain, may I request Dr. Jantar Sengupta, Secretary and Curator of Victoria Memorial Hall, to kindly welcome all those who have joined in and also introduce the speaker for this evening.
Thank you, Raju, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to this evening's event. And happy International Day for Monuments and Sites, also called World Heritage Day. As many of you know, we celebrate this day every year with an event that generates some conversation on heritage. And this year we thought something related to the concept of UNESCO World Heritage Cities would be interesting, especially coming in the wake of the inscription of the Durga Puja of Bengal and of India on the UNESCO list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. And it's our privilege to have with us here tonight one of our leading experts on this, Dr. Shikha Jain, eminent architect and founder director of Development and Research Organization for Nature, Arts and Heritage, abbreviated to DRONA. And she will speak on the challenges of UNESCO inscriptions for an Indian city, learning from Jaipur, for whose inscription on the UNESCO list, Dr. Jain has been one of the key figures. Dr. Jain, of course, does not need any introduction to this audience, but for the sake of formality, I will try a brief introductory statement on her stellar career. Dr. Jain, founder director of DRONA, has an extensive portfolio on cultural heritage of India that covers conservation, heritage-based development, world heritage and museum planning of more than 60 projects for the government of India, various state governments, and international organizations such as the Getty Foundation and the World Monuments Fund. Dr. Jain represented India as a cultural heritage expert in the UNESCO World Heritage Committee during India's elected term in that committee from 2011 to 2015. She is representing India as a bureau member in the 45th World Heritage Committee session of UNESCO in June 2022, that is in a couple of months' time. As an international expert on world heritage, she has advised government organizations in Singapore, Malaysia, the United Arab Emirates, Myanmar, and UNESCO offices at Jakarta, Indonesia, and Myanmar. She has worked as consultant to the UNESCO New Delhi on several missions, and she has steered UNESCO World Heritage listing for all cultural world heritage sites in Rajasthan. Dr. Shikha Jain is the state convener of INTAC Haryana chapter and member of the advisory committee of World Heritage under the Archaeological Survey of India, the Ministry of Culture. She is vice president of ECOFORT, International Scientific Committee on Fortifications and Military Heritage, of ICOMOS, which is the International Council on Monuments and Sites. And she is also an advisory committee member for the master's course in Heritage Conservation and Management at the Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun, which hosts a UNESCO Category 2 Center on World Natural Heritage Management and Training for Asia and the Pacific region. And you will be pleased to know that she is currently advising iconic Ministry of Culture institutions on two key projects: the Indian Museum, Kolkata, for the recuration of 9 galleries, and the National Library, Kolkata, for the upcoming Museum of the World. And that's all I have to say for now. And like all of you, I'm looking forward to a lecture from which we hope to have several takeaways, which we could perhaps try out for Kolkata. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Shikha Jain to speak on the challenges of UNESCO inscriptions for an Indian city, learning from Jaipur. Dr. Shikha Jain.
Thank you, Dr. Sengupta, for that elaborate introduction. It's my pleasure today, to be here on this day for this lecture to be hosted by the Victoria Memorial Hall. And I'm really looking forward to the interaction today that my experience will bring forth from amongst the esteemed audience that we have here. So if my screen is visible, I can just start the presentation.
Yes, it is visible.
Dr. Jain, it is visible, but just one housekeeping rule for all those who have joined. Please keep your microphones on mute for the duration of the presentation. Otherwise, the host might be forced to remove you or mute you forcefully. At the end of the presentation, of course, you're free to ask questions, but please put them on the chat box and we shall convey the questions to Dr. Jain to respond after the presentation. Thank you very much, Dr. Jain. Please carry on.
Thank you. So as is already mentioned, my presentation is really about the UNESCO inscriptions that me and my team has been able to achieve for Jaipur in the last few years. And learning from that, as well as other conservation initiatives that actually led to such inscriptions, as well as the current challenges that Jaipur city is facing in fulfilling the commitments that are required for the World Heritage Committee. So I'll begin with, just showing what UNESCO recognitions have been achieved by Jaipur if we look at from 2010 to 19, in the last 9 years. We had Jantar Mantar, the central monument in Jaipur, inscribed on the World Heritage Site list. And in 2013, it was Amer Fort that became a World Heritage Site. It was part of a serial nomination for 6 hill forts of Rajasthan. And this is also the first and only cultural heritage serial nomination of India, where you see 6 sites inscribed in one go. In 2015, Jaipur was inscribed as UNESCO Creative City of Crafts and Folk Arts. This is, not really a listing like the intangible cultural heritage listing such as Durga Puja or the World Heritage Site listing. This is a UNESCO network of creative cities where the city itself and the local municipal corporation takes that initiative. It is recognized as a city of any creative activity, which could be crafts and folk arts, design, music, or anything else. So 2015 is when Jaipur gained this recognition. And in 2019, Jaipur became a World Heritage City. So if we just look at this timeline, there are 3 World Heritage inscriptions for Jaipur, which the city should really value. And also the fact that today, each country across the world can only nominate 1 site per year. So to actually have 3 sites in less than 10 years from one particular city, it is quite probably the only one of its kind in Jaipur in India that has achieved this. So what is important, of course, is to realize that there is a lot of commitment attached to it, which the city needs to recognize and the stakeholders need to recognize. And I will start, this journey showing you from 2006, since we got involved with Jaipur, and also since the government of Rajasthan took some pioneering conservation initiatives, such as the Amer Fort conservation work, which led to its inscription in 2013 later. And I will end in 2022 showing you what has been achieved and what are the challenges still left. So I start with Amer because this was the first capital of Dhundar region just before Jaipur. This was the capital city. This is a view in tentatively sort of what would have been in 967 century, where the forest area was occupied by the Meena tribe with some kind of fortifications. And then this was taken up by the Kachwaha Rajputs in 1150 CE, and there was a small dwelling that now sits below the Amer fort, which is the earliest construction done by them besides the fortifications, strengthening the fortifications. In 1589 CE, Man Singh built his palace, and you can see this central courtyard space. Of course, Man Singh has relations with Bengal, and it was the temple, the deity of Shila Devi was brought by him from Bengal and installed here, and it is worshipped till day in the temple in Amer. Later on, we see that, this is the Man Singh Palace with the Baradari in the center. He was an emperor for, he was a commander for the Mughal emperor. So you can see, the kind of cultural exchange, the architectural styles showing the cusped arches in the central Baradari. And similar palaces were built by him in areas where he commanded, like Pakistan, Kabul, and in the Rohtas fort in Pakistan. Later on in 17th century, you can see how it expanded, and you see additional courtyards, very typical of the Mughal fort planning, but interestingly adapted to the Rajput planning on the hill. So you can see the Mughal symmetrical plan of a fort, including Diwane Khas, Diwane Aam, and a Jaleb Chowk, is actually stretched out onto the hill, and it steps down. So it's very nicely fitted onto the contours, giving it a very unique local vocabulary. And similarly, you have exchanges that show, the Mughal gardens, where you have Rajput amalgamation. In 18th century, you see interventions in Amer Fort, and this is when Savai Jai Singh, at an early age, when he was just in his teens, 11 years old, he took the throne. And already he was starting, constructions and major interventions even in the Amer Palace. But also at the same time thinking of designing a new city, because Amer had become very congested. And it was in 18th century, 1727, that Amer was abandoned as the previous capital, and he moved into the newly designed capital of Jaipur. This particular monument, Amer, was still visited by the family because the temple was there. It was used for family rituals, as well as for visitors, who would be shown these special palace areas. But otherwise, the town was largely abandoned, and a lot of families of the craftspeople moved down to Jaipur. In 1968, it was declared protected by Rajasthan State Archaeology. And for a long time, it stayed, being on this triangle, tourist triangle, on which Jaipur is located with Agra and Delhi. Amer was visited a lot, yet its potential was not realized till 2005, when a major conservation work was taken up by Amer Development and Management Authority, for which the consultant was Shikha Jain. There were major restoration works, and this is the time when government of Rajasthan also invested in the local craftspeople, in traditional materials, in building schedule of rates pertaining to archaeology, and actually did some model role model conservation works. Amer being the first of the monument under this. They also restored the 7.44 kilometer fortifications around the Amer town. Restoration of historic gardens. These are the hammams, the water systems that you can still see in operation with the pulley when you visit Amer today, and excavation of tunnel areas going on to the higher fort of Jaigarh. And this was all actually done under an authority that was specially created, Amer Management and Development Authority, which is a very sustainable revenue model even today for monuments in India, because in this particular case, the income from the monument does not go back into the treasury like it happens in most cases, but it actually goes back to the Amer Development and Management Authority. So 2/3 of the income generated goes back in the maintenance and upkeep which the authority handles by hiring, various agencies for maintaining toilets, or even for maintaining this entire Hathi Gaon, which is a village for elephants specially created after the conservation works in Amer were done, where you can see the elephants that take the visitors for a ride from morning till evening till afternoon. They come back in the afternoon, and this village is designed by Rahul Malhotra. And you can see that that's where they rest, and the mahouts are also, they get a percentage from the income of Amer to maintain this entire space. And in fact, with time now, even the Hathi Gaon itself has become a visitor destination, and international tourists really like to visit this place. So it's just to show that these are the conservation models that were established, which were followed later on. So Amer was then nominated, inscribed in 2013 as World Heritage Site as part of 5 other forts in the serial nomination. In a similar situation, we also see this Ghat Ki Guni area, which is on the east side of Jaipur. So this, I'm just showing you the surrounding hills, starting with Amer on top, and on eastern side, the Ghat Ki Guni area, which actually was a route. It was a highway from the Mughal period, when Akbar used to visit Ajmer, and Rajasthan was not really Rajasthan, it was known as the Ajmer Suba, because that was the center of the Mughals. And you see this particular stretch of 2.5 kilometers, which goes from, when you enter into the Dhundahar region. So from Agra, it moves on to Amer, and later on it was directed towards Jaipur below. And you can see the coast minars of Akbar's time marking the routes in when it goes to Amer area. This particular stretch in the valley has about 52 properties, and these were unprotected properties. They were declared protected by the state archaeology. The Agra Jaipur highway was diverted because it was the black suits of the trucks that was damaging these properties, and an entire conservation initiative was taken up to restore historic gardens. So these are series of historic gardens, again developed by Savai Jai Singh too, and in fact on the model of the Agra riverfront. So this is a very unique site. And again, here the conservation of gardens focused on traditional materials, craftspeople, and 52 structures under the State Archaeology Act. And they were, again, this was managed by the Amer Development and Management Authority. And you can see that there was a tunnel that was proposed. It took 10 years to get environmental clearance and to get this 50-meter tunnel, which is now the current Agra-Jaipur highway. So that the main highway took a detour, and this particular stretch of 2.5 kilometers with the properties was protected. These are views of the conservation work taken up, and the heritage walk that was finally launched in September 2014 and continues till date, giving experience of the historic gardens. So now moving on to our main city, Jaipur, which Savai Jai Singh too started thinking about when he was sitting in Amer and realized that the city is getting congested, and there were several names suggested finally before arriving at the name of Jaipur. You can see in this particular plan how the Jaipur planning, responds to the hills above, which we were just seeing, Amer, and on the east side, the Ghat Ki Guni area. So it's this particular design that is the ingenuity of Savai Jai Singh too, besides, of course, the Prastara plan and the gridiron model that is so talked about. But if you see on the right side, you can see the particular circles. These are actually the location or the diameter covered by a cannonball, where the cannon J1 is located in Jaigarh. You see this red dot here. So you can see that the entire city was completely protected and designed in a manner that all the hills were utilized to capitalize this as a military landscape. And you can see these two smaller hills, the Hatrai Fort and the Moti Dugri, also on the west and the south, which were just like outcrops. So really looking at, what is the heritage of Jaipur today, it's much beyond monuments and architectural masterpieces like the Hawa Mahal. It is about the way the city is created in relationship to its natural surroundings and its past history of Amer or Ghat Ki Guni, how its magnificent forts and palaces dialogue with nature, about its lakes and stepwells and water systems, and its hustling streets and bustling bazaars, its chokris and choppers, the charbags and chaugan. This charbag plan is in the center of Jaipur. This is part of a larger plan of Amer, where just down south you see this particular charbag garden, which was called the Jainivas, and currently it sits in the center of Jaipur, and you can see that this was designed in 1711. So this was really the first component or the genesis of Jaipur, one would say. And it's at the time when Jai Singh was hunting in the surroundings of this particular garden area. The Havelis and Haveli temples, which Jaipur is enriched with, the foods and festivals, about the royals and the nobles, craftspeople and artisans, and the stories of its pink and its people. It was in 1727 when Jai Singh conceived and inaugurated this trade and commerce city. He invited merchants from various other cities. He invited craftspeople from various other cities. And this is a letter signed by him, which is currently displayed at the Rajasthan State Archives Museum, where he's inviting traders to come and settle in his city and giving them tax incentives for that. This is a historic plan where you can see the construction is being carried out in phases from the west. So 2 of the choppers being constructed, and the instructions here clearly say what needs to be built. And this is what he used for monitoring. What is unique about this city is how he took the city planning on a project mode and completed it within a few years. This is a painting in Navalgarh, a nearby town, because once Jaipur and the gridiron plan was established in the 18th century, it became a role model for all other towns in Rajasthan, and especially in the Shekhawati and Savai Madhopur region. So you can see the depiction out here. And most of these towns started using this gridiron planning. A historic image that shows the choppered area which was earlier the water reservoir. So it had a unique water management system that has now changed with time. And if we really look at this 18th century city with these wide gridiron roads that today, are troubled with the urban development pressure, with the traffic and the increasing heights of the buildings. Yet it is really commendable that an 18th century city plan can take this kind of pressure today. So looking at this situation, this is an image from 2006 of the streets. It was realized that there is a need for a heritage management plan. And that's when this first heritage management plan for the city was generated. It is probably one of the first heritage management plan at city level in India. And it was realized that the economy of Jaipur relies on heritage tourism and cultural industries, which are within the walled city area, and which has a huge density of about 60,000 persons per square kilometer. So it really needs to be addressed from a heritage perspective. And the plan was created for the city called the walled city, but also for areas outside the walled city. Within the urbanization limits of the Jaipur master plan. There were about 1,096 structures listed as per typology: forts and palaces, city walls and gates, temples, religious buildings, havelis, houses, the public and commercial buildings, and the wells and boweries. And this was then, there were projects that were prioritized under this plan, and it became part of the Jaipur master plan in 2025. Jaipur master plan in 2013, and it was as in the master plan designed for 2025, year 2025. And it was also recognized as a best practice by the National Institute of Urban Affairs in 2015. So moving on to some of the points that were mentioned in the plan, also identifying the potential of Jantar Mantar, heritage walks, and other bazaars. Jantar Mantar nomination came up in 2009 when it was nominated. It was the year of astronomy, and it was suggested by the UNESCO director, New Delhi, that it would be an appropriate moment to nominate observatories. In fact, when we were going in for this nomination, it was initially designed as a serial nomination of all 4 Jantar Mantars designed by Savai Jai Singh. The others exist in Delhi, Varanasi, and Ujjain. And the 5th one, Mathura, is no longer there. So unfortunately, the serial nomination could not be taken up because while Rajasthan government could prepare the Jaipur nomination, the other 3 were not, governments did not come forth and the stakeholders did not come forth in time. So this was nominated and inscribed in 2010, and its management plan is being implemented since 2011. What is interesting is its relationship to Jaipur. It is again one of the first monument after the Jain Nivas Garden. Jantar Mantar was also being simultaneously an experiment that was being carried out by Savai Jai Singh too, both in Delhi and Jaipur. And it shows how the plan of Jaipur is actually shaped not just by geography, Hindu philosophy, and planning principles, but also astronomy in terms of its orientation with reference to the sundial at Jantar Mantar. So all the grid lines, all the roads are aligned to the sundial, making it a unique city in the world that continues to evolve, and without losing its street scale and proportion, which was especially the dimension of Savaya, which was named after Savai Jai Singh, which means a quarter extra, is something that even the traditional masons still today know, that's a specific dimension to be used. The astronomical instrument of Brihat Samrat Yantra is the largest sundial in the world. And as part of the Jantar Mantar management plan, it's not only these instruments within Jantar Mantar that were enhanced. It was also the buffer zone, which included 2 of the bazaars, the Sirediori and the Tripolia Bazaar, that were taken up. So in terms of the Jantar Mantar management plan and its implementation, it was these 18 instruments, the knowledge about astronomy. There were these astrolabs and books devised by Savai Jai Singh in dialogue with the tables created by him in dialogue with Jesuits and Qazis and Pandits together, and the readings which were all lying in stores, and they are now displayed in an interpretation center within Jantar Mantar. And there is the digital interface for visitors, which shows how each instrument works and what is the logic. There are several workshops held for children and for guides to train them into understanding the use of these instruments, and all these instruments are currently functioning. Regular readings are taken using them. There was a projection mapping that was started on this sundial. Besides that, LIDAR documentation by the government of Rajasthan, which also translated into games related to knowledge games using the instruments in Jantar Mantar. Outside in the buffer zone also, like I mentioned, there were 2 bazaars around Jantar Mantar. So this is when, a detail of historic layering of Jaipur bazaars was studied, and 3 styles were identified at the time of Savai Jai Singh too, where we see the Rajput and Mughal architecture amalgamation and particular features that came up in this particular period, 18th century, when Jaipur was started. In the 19th century, you see the British colonial elements coming in and more of Indo-Saracenic architecture. It was the reign of Savai Ram Singh too. And you see the last phase, and these are all urban level interventions. The last phase is during the time of Mirza Ismail in the early 20th century, where you see the Jaipur bazaars and the front shop facades coming up, and the Art Deco style also surfacing. So based on these, facade control guidelines were prepared, looking at what the owner's particular property would be. They could use it for repair and for managing that property. Also, the urban conservation of Jaipur Bazaars was carried out, and it was probably for the Ministry of Urban Development which funded it. It was the first time that public bazaars were being funded by the government, and they raised question that why should they fund facades of private buildings. And at that time, it was the justification given to them was that the Municipal Corporation of Jaipur had a role to maintain the color of Jaipur, which they call pink. Of course, it is a sort of sandstone color and a lime wash that is used to create that effect. And it's because it's their role to do that, they have been, maintaining the facades. And based on that, this grant was first funded by the Ministry of Urban Development, which is now the Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry. And the same logic was then extended to the 12 heritage cities where facade conservation was carried out on various projects in 2015 in India. There were also heritage walks. Of course, they were initially started in 2003, but no physical upgradation of the walks was taken up till 2014-15, where the crafts streets were also upgraded, and these continue to now be upgraded under the Smart City program. And in this particular situation, we looked at all the craft streets, the names of the streets, the condition of the building in each street, each particular property. There were social surveys carried out for each house, finding, what is the ownership, the number of years they have stayed, the vehicles, the number of vehicles they have, issues of sanitation, and how they can be involved in the heritage walk in a participatory manner. Whether they want to use it as a bed and bath, or they want to showcase their house as a museum, or just not allow people, or have a restaurant, cafe. So this was mapped in discussion with them. There were major issues identified: vehicular parking, garbage disposal, and stray animals. And unfortunately, these are still the three major issues plaguing the city. This is an example of how particular bed and bath arrangements were worked out with the house owners, and there were institutional involvement. Oxford Brookes University urban planning students designed certain open areas where we shared with them all the drawings, and these were shown. All the proposals were discussed with the community, and currently this walk is functional. It has been taken up in 2 phases, in 2014 and then in 2019-20 under the Smart City. And now on to the last phase between 2015 to 2022, where we actually have 2 city level recognitions for Jaipur, being the creative city and also inscribed on as World Heritage City. Simultaneously, you can see that the conservation work spread into the entire city. It was focused on the central area earlier. And it also covered crafts as a major category, as intangible heritage. So it was in 2015 that the dossier for UNESCO Creative City of Crafts and Folk Art was prepared. And these are the various designations. You can be a city of crafts and folk art, design, film, gastronomy, literature, media, arts, or music. And it requires a lot of debate, of course. And you may be aware that Kolkata is proposing to go for the City of Literature, which would really be a great recognition for Kolkata. But for Jaipur, we had to, despite the fact that it has an international literature festival, it also has other, creative aspects. Yet when we did a stakeholders meeting, it was realized that crafts and folk art comes out as a stronger case. And that's why we decided, with the government of Rajasthan, that this would be an ideal nomination. So all the crafts locations were studied and mapped within the city, and even what was in the expanding city later on. And there was a categorization. It used to be, even Savai Jai Singh too designed it as a city of crafts. There were 36 karkhanas or 36 small scale industries. Of course, not all of them remain, because some of them were related to just the catering to the royal palaces. Like, there was a Tater Khana just for heating the water for the royal palaces. But there were others associated with royal patronage, such as jewelry, pottery, textiles, stone crafts, metalware, and paper, which still continue. And also in the folk arts, local folk arts like Galibazi, Tamasha, and puppet shows that continue in the chowkis of Jaipur till today. So these were documented in great detail. There were several craftspeople and master craftspeople who were interviewed, and they gave details of how each kind of jewelry was, the origin of evolution of that particular crafts, the material and process, and what are the issues currently plaguing these particular crafts, so that they could be addressed as part of the Creative City nomination. So this is just a glimpse of some of the crafts that were documented in detail, including the list of craftspeople and also the institutions that promote these crafts currently in Jaipur, such as Indian Institute of Crafts and Design or the Stone Crafts Center for Development of Stones. So these are stone crafts, the metal and wood crafts, the paper crafts, painting, building crafts, including the lime crafts, frescoes, and mirror work. And the idea was also to link these crafts, because the Creative City designation is actually focusing on sustainable development goals, and they really recognize a city when they understand that the crafts or the creative component is linked with its development goals, and it is integrated in its master plan. So, to take this forward, there were several heritage walks that got linked with the bazaars, got linked with craft streets and museums. And this is one example where you see the craftsperson would now be working, he's making lakh bangles and actually, selling it to the visitors en route. Even linking them with World Heritage sites like Jantar, Mantar, where here you see a universal access, walk being conducted by a visually impaired intern from Drona. There were several workshops organized to promote this linkage between tangible and intangible cultural heritage, and to really celebrate the living heritage of the city. So architecture students learning from craftspeople and creating interventions in public spaces using crafts to celebrate. And another aspect in 2015 that started was the new program, the Jaipur Smart City, under the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. And again, there were 100 cities first listed. Jaipur was one of the 100 that got through. And amongst these, there were several, including Jaipur, Udaipur, Gwalior, and Bhubaneswar, who highlighted heritage as an important component. So again, we see that under the Jaipur Smart City Plan, there were earlier plans that were merged, earlier proposals that were merged, and there were projects like Rajasthan School of Arts, which is a museum converted, a museum of crafts, which is taken as the first project under Smart City in 2018, and it's a good role model project. And finally, getting the inscription in 2019, there were commitments that came with it of protecting the outstanding universal value. Jaipur is recognized for its expression of the astronomical skills, living traditions, unique urban form, and exemplary foresighted city planning of an 18th century city from India. And that's its OUV, which is what needs to be protected as per World Heritage commitment. And it's under this outstanding universal value, you have three criteria for which Jaipur is recognized. The first one is criteria 2. It's an exemplary development in town planning and architecture that demonstrates amalgamation and interchange of several ideas of the late medieval period, as we've seen, in the three historic styles, the Hindu, Mughal, and contemporary Western ideas. Criteria 4, which celebrates a city planning, where it remains a unique response to the terrain that we have seen, and amalgamates ancient Indian treaties to contemporary global town plans and imperial Mughal architecture to finally produce a monumental urban form unparalleled in its scale and magnificence for its times. And lastly, the criteria 6, which is intangible, which was quite a challenge, to have this inscribed on criteria 6, which celebrates the 36 Karkhanas and the initial planning of Jaipur with 36 industries as a trade and commerce city, which included crafts like gemstone, lac jewelry, stone idols, miniature paintings, and others, with a specified street and market design for each crafts that continues to date. So promoting these, as attributes, as criteria, that need to be enhanced. Again, in 2018-19, we had heritage walks that were further strengthened with apps, collaborating with technology agencies like Traveler, where you can see it's again linked to the Sustainable Development Goals to devise and implement policies to promote sustainable tourism and create jobs and promotes local culture and products. So this is the Thatera Ki Gali, which is the brass craftspeople streets, where you can see them making these vessels, and they are largely consumed by the Jaipur residents themselves during festivals like Diwali. So just to enhance, the craftsmanship, how augmented reality, can show these artifacts while walking on the street, and other such stories about the craftspeople is what is promoted through this walk. And again, in 2019, you can see post-inscription, the Jaipur Founders Day. There is a celebration of the craftspeople, the master craftspeople, besides new heritage walks like the stone crafts walk that is further initiated, and discussions amongst the stakeholders on the 36 Karkhanas, on the future of the crafts industries in Jaipur. Simultaneously, in terms of management, Jaipur was looking at using enhanced technologies such as drone surveys. Of course, it started as part of the Walled City survey during post-inscription, but it was during the COVID-19 lockdown. It was very well managed because it was the epicenter. The Walled City and the World Heritage City was the epicenter in the first wave and the second wave, and it was very well managed using drones, which are currently being used for mapping and for preparing the special area heritage plan, which Jaipur is committed to deliver. Even during the second lockdown, we floated an internship program just for GIS students across India, and a lot of documentation which was on AutoCAD or just in in drawings was translated. So you have all the tangible attributes, the restaurants, cafes, road hierarchy, the bus routes, the parking, bike rentals, interpretation centers, cultural centers, museums. All these are now on GIS, and they are going to be uploaded in the website jaipurworldheritage.com. There were existing trails again, available on this website, but can be downloaded by the visitors, and they can just walk around these areas. Different kinds of trails, including crafts, cuisine, and other important elements of the city. And the certain new thematic walks are also now proposed. And this was with support of the Rajasthan Tourism Department, the entire internship program. And it is currently going to be part of the tourism interpretation plan, which Jaipur is committed to produce as part of the special area heritage plan to submit to UNESCO. Jaipurworldheritage.com was an initiative taken by a number of NGOs in Jaipur. So you can see, and two colleges of architecture, Manipal University, Jaipur, and Ayojan, along with Intact, Traveler, the technology partner, Jaipur Uncharted, and Jaipur Virasat Foundation and Jajam, together to build this website both in Hindi and English, so that local stakeholders or citizens of Jaipur can actually put their stories, or also any issues that they have within the World Heritage City. Coming to the last section on commitments, there is a huge, despite whatever work has been done, there is a huge commitment that the Jaipur Municipal Corporation Heritage is still needs to fulfill for the World Heritage Committee. They have to prepare a special area heritage plan, which should have detail of each and every house. And there are 9 chokris. A particular chokri has about 22,000 structures, that need to be mapped. So you can imagine the the amount of work that is required in such a detailed heritage plan. There is a detailed heritage inventory which INTAC has initiated. We had listed around 1588 structures, and INTAC is currently updated 600 of those, whereas the rest are yet to be updated. The legal protection, as you saw, the heights of the buildings, despite the fact that there are heritage bylaws in Jaipur, yet you see people are encroaching and increasing, the building height, which is not allowed. Management system, which was proposed for Jaipur, it needs to be strengthened. The heritage impact assessment for projects like parking issues in Jaipur or new parking plans. In fact, some of the smart city projects, while some of them were very well tuned to heritage, some of them actually with time have started creating problems or impacting heritage attributes. So doing heritage impact assessments for the smart city projects or any other projects like the metro extension is essential. A detailed monitoring program for all the attributes, and an interpretation and presentation policy. So these were the given points by the World Heritage Committee that Jaipur had to submit by December 2020, which of course, because of COVID, now it's still in the process. There were issues with the Jaipur city wall. 70% of the wall still exists, but about 40% of that is encroached. So, there is a long-term plan on how to recover that wall back and how to maintain the current wall. A DPR has already been prepared for that. The Jaipur Nagar Nigam also took help from the UNESCO New Delhi office in preparing this special area heritage plan, and there were experts from France who have been involved, who recently also did a field workshop from April 1 to 9, last 2 weeks. And there were several issues that were raised, but it was a 9-day workshop where they also had 1 day just for institutions. There were about 6-7 institutions that presented their works, including CEPT, SPA, and the institutions in Jaipur, on how they can support this preparation of SAHP or surveys. And also there were some ground checks on the actual issues on ground in various chowkis. As a simultaneous exercise, there is this research practice heritage lab that was floated by ICROM and IUCN in 2021, and it has just also closed. There were 6 workshops under this, and there were 8 World Heritage Sites selected by ICROM for this particular lab. So as part of the research practice team, we participated in this, including Manipal University, the UNESCO Category 2 Center, and the Municipal Corporation of Jaipur with its heritage cell. So it's largely the research and practice team with these workshops, looking at what are the challenges, what could be the newer areas of research. And in particular, there was this issue of natural heritage, which of course is also linked to this theme of climate change. Jaipur is currently facing, as you saw, the hills in the surroundings are need to be maintained, along with the water systems, the traditional water systems that need to be revived. So a detailed physical infrastructure was also carried out by us for one of the chowkis. And these kind of activities, like discussing these issues with other World Heritage Sites across the world through this lab, helped us in finalizing on certain aspects. But the challenges, of course, as you've seen, it remains in urban heritage. The idea, the whole city itself has a population of about 400,000. The density, as I already mentioned, per square kilometer, including the floating population every day, comes to about 60,000. And it's a huge task to manage all such issues as sanitation, or electrical works or other infrastructure, besides, of course, the heritage conservation initiatives that have already been achieved by the government of Rajasthan. So it's just to say that, while it's easy to conserve the monuments, we saw in case of Jantar Mantar and in case of Amer that there could be some role models that were developed. When it comes to the World Heritage City, while its outstanding universal value is clearly not in doubt, It is a great concern that the development pressures in the city should not impact the attributes and the criteria and its OUV in any manner. And this is a constant pressure that the city faces, and it has to address these conflicting aspirations by the diverse community, the shopkeepers, the residents, the visitors, the NGOs and government organizations, also battling with the progressive builders and unplanned growth and encroachments. So I'll end my presentation with a thank you, and we can open it for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jain, for that absolutely fascinating, absolutely captivating and fascinating presentation. Listening to you, I was thinking back, as you can well imagine, on Bengal and on Calcutta. And some of the challenges that you have laid out in the last part of your talk are also challenges faced to a greater or to a lesser extent by all major cities, including Calcutta, of course. Calcutta has the pressures of population density and so on. But I have a couple of thoughts that I would be interested in hearing your thoughts about it. First of all, looking back in Bengal, we have in your fascinating what you have summarized in your absolutely captivating presentation is an enormous work of planning and documentation and implementation that has gone behind it, and obviously all of this cannot come from any one single entity like the government. So I was just wondering about the relative contributions of the state, and I was very curious also about you told us about the problems about the serial nomination of observatories in the International Year of Astronomy, and as you mentioned, Rajasthan was dynamic. It came up with its own plan for the nomination, but there were other state governments which were not as forthcoming, not as dynamic perhaps. So therein lies the problem of very differential responses of various governments to the sort of need for, it's not, UNESCO is just a word, but it's about organizing and showcasing your work to the rest of the world. So I was wondering about the relative contribution of the state, both the state government of Rajasthan and the central government, any help that might have come from them, and the corporate sector and the civil society in the wonderful work of heritage that has gone into Jaipur. Because I was thinking of Bengal, like Bengal, of course, was back in the 19th century was the seat of the so-called intellectual flowering, called variously as the Bengal Renaissance and others. Like the Jaipur Literary Festival, we have in Kolkata. In fact, right in the Victoria Memorial Hall, we have the Tata Steel Kolkata Literary Meet, which many major authors, including people like Vikram Seth and Amitabh Ghosh, have said, is in terms of its content no less than the Jaipur Lit Fest, perhaps in some aspects even better. And we have some of the iconic cultural institutions of India, some of which you have yourself have seen at close quarters and are working in. We have a proactive chapter of INTAC, we have a Heritage Commission, we have a Heritage Committee, we have a slew of good architects and all that. So I was wondering what is there which makes Rajasthan and Jaipur as a successful template that we could perhaps learn from, because Jaipur, Ahmedabad, these are all capital cities. And so they are large cities, they all face population pressures and other kinds of challenges of civic life as we do. So what kind of the collaboration and cooperation among various entities, various organizations, various parties concerned made this possible that we could perhaps learn from. So if you can just please share your thoughts on this.
Sure. Yeah. So those are very interesting questions, Dr. Sen Gupta. I would, like to state what you said. On the historic cities in India, I think there are several that deserve World Heritage, besides Jaipur and Ahmedabad. And this is a fact that was recognized by UNESCO in its, 18th General Assembly. If you see the Auditor General's report, it actually mentions that there is a large potential of urban heritage and World Heritage cities in countries like India. However, management is the biggest challenge. They don't have anything protected. So this is a fact that is recognized by all, and we know even today, I mean, we have historic cities which are really precious, but the management system is what needs to be sorted. And in fact, there's a very interesting incident about Kolkata. When I was working on Jaipur, and it was in 2013-14, the Principal Secretary Urban Development in Rajasthan actually got a letter from the Principal Secretary Urban Development of West Bengal. And the letter actually said, that Jaipur is following this sort of urban guidelines and, has a pink character and is called the Pink City. And the next sentence, I mean, it said that, do you feel that Kolkata should also go for a pink color or any other color that is consistent? So that was so, I mean, I just looked at the letter and I was asked to prepare the response. And I obviously said that Kolkata itself is unique in so many ways. None of our cities need to emulate each other. Each has a unique value. So of course, I mean, when somebody gets a World Heritage status, they like in case of Ahmedabad or Jaipur, I think Ahmedabad is facing equal challenges. But you're right that, the synergy between the central government, between Archaeological Survey of India, which is the nodal agency that nominates or selects a nomination dossier or technically evaluates any dossier, and then the steering by the state government, which wants to take up that nomination, and also the technical aspect, whether the city is ready or whether the site is ready in terms of its protection and management. And which is why I showed, this right from the beginning, from Amer to how Jaipur was building its conservation history. And there was a sustained, period of time where it's looking at heritage management planning, when it created the plan, and then later on through the plan, it was also taking up projects and also creating role models, both in terms of planning and projects. So I think planning, policies, projects in concurrence. So whether it's a initial plan or it's a smart city plan, or what is, the basic idea is that the vision of the city should remain same. The programs of the government change, but if the city has a focused vision, then it can achieve. And it's a similar case in Ahmedabad. The municipal corporation there has been very strong right from the beginning, and they were the first to create a heritage cell, which set a role model. So I think some initial, pioneering work does help. Of course, in case of West Bengal, the West Bengal State Heritage Commission is a good example. No other state has such a heritage commission. But it's not just creating something, but also following it through with time and showing progress. That is important. On the private sector, in this case, of course, there were private initiatives. In the city now, we see, a lot of Haveli owners are consciously adopting heritage conservation models and taking care of the material being used, or using it for heritage tourism activities. And that's again an incentive that Rajasthan government took, which, it is the one that created this concept of heritage tourism for India. That's what I say. And it's not really the government. It actually started with the royal patrons, because when the privy purse came in and there were, there were these properties of the royals that were being taken up by the government, that's when they established these trusts as well as heritage hotels to sustain. So the Rambagh Palace in Jaipur and the Lake Palace in Udaipur are the first heritage hotels in India. And what is good, I'm talking about these heritage hotels because in case of a World Heritage inscription in Rajasthan, the government gives this incentive that all the hotels within the vicinity of that World Heritage area would not have to pay any taxes. And even for creating heritage hotels, Rajasthan government has a policy that, it's tax-free for the Haveli owners who are converting their hotels into heritage hotels. So that has been an incentive with the government. These particular policies and incentives have helped Rajasthan to sustain its historic city's character, despite the fact that it does not have legislation, which you find in case of Mumbai, which started in 1995. So these are some of the factors. There has not been a major player like what you said, Tata, or a major private player as such in Jaipur. It's largely government driven, but a lot of local NGOs that are active, like Jaipur Virasat Foundation or Intact, our own organization, other institutes. So there is a large number of local stakeholders who are concerned.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's what makes it all the more remarkable. Thank you. Thank you. I think, yes, Raju, please. I think there's a question.
Yeah, there are a couple of comments and also one or two questions here. You see, one comment to Dr. Shikha Jain says, great vision, great action, great initiatives, a great learning for us. A big salute to you. This gives us a guiding base for Varanasi. This is from Rana P.V. Singh, President, ACLA. So this is one of the comments that has come in the chat box.
And then coming from Varanasi, that has a special resonance.
Right.
Professor Rana is very kind of this.
And then there is another comment laced with a query. Thank you, Shikha. This is from Satwanji. Thank you, Shikha, for an outstanding presentation. Please comment on how you foresee the integration of the rich heritage component in the smart city development of Jaipur.
So yeah, I mean that has been a challenge, since the smart city program itself was declared. A lot of us heritage conservation, professionals got concerned whether heritage focus would be lost. But fortunately, a lot of cities have kept heritage as a focus. And Jaipur also, when the smart city plan was created in 2015, it was quite a sound plan and it was going very well. Like I showed you the museum that was created. But however, with time, what we've seen, between 2019 to 2022, there were a lot of change of officers. And this is something, again, very critical in most of our cities, that the officials change and the commitment that they gave to UNESCO or the understanding of the World Heritage tag or in general, the understanding of heritage also changes. So there has been, because of these changes, the smart city plan has lost its initial vision. And while they are working in a very project-based mode. So while they're creating some projects which are good, there are others which are actually damaging. And the idea, of course, with the World Heritage Committee, the commitment was that there would be a state level committee under the chief secretary. And fortunately, now that we have the new chief secretary who's was the earlier DG ASI. So I think this problem is going to soon be solved because there is an in-depth understanding among senior officials. Even the urban development advisor recently, who's been given charge of World Heritage, has a special focus on streamlining the smart city projects and ensuring that they do all heritage impact assessments and they follow, the commitments that are given to the World Heritage Committee.
Right. Thank you for that. There is another question from our young colleague, Isha Lahiri. She says, thank you for your very insightful presentation, ma'am. I was intrigued by your discussion on craftsmanship. Do you think that the interface such projects created between local artisans and university graduates receiving formal training in art altered the way traditional craftsmanship is practiced and perceived at the moment?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Isha. It's important, that the craftsmanship also evolves with new ideas. And that is definitely an aspect, like they learn from the craftspeople, whereas, there are newer ideas and fresher ideas with the craftsmen also who engage with them. And Jaipur has this Indian Institute of Crafts and Design, where designers are regularly working with the local craftspeople. They have specific scholarship for children of the craftspeople who can actually take training there. So this definitely, and you will find a lot of a lot of ateliers in Jaipur which are actually looking at this fusion of design and craftsmanship, and there are new designs evolving. You see them sometimes in a Haveli hotel being converted. So it is definitely very, very innovative, and this exchange is very important.
Thank you. Now, you did mention something about Jaipur and the Pink City and whether Kolkata would strive to have something like that. For whatever reason, Kolkata prefers a color combination of blue and white. And you talked about tax benefits too, and there are tax benefits for houses which are painted blue and white here also. But I have one little query. In one of the slides you had shown, while saying that, Kolkata is aspiring for a literature tag, okay, you had also shown a slide where that literature comes only in 5th place, where art and craft is in the 1st place. So do you think Kolkata stands any chance at all?
So that is not a list as per numbering. It's just, I mean, it's a parallel list. So it was put like that, but all of them are equal. You have to, one has to, like the citizens have to realize the uniqueness of the city, the creative component that they want to celebrate, and that can be celebrated. So I think Kolkata definitely for literature, and now especially because I'm involved in the Museum of Word at National Library, I hope that project will add to its nomination, strength. So I think definitely. I mean, even Savai Jai Singh too had, Vidyadhar Bhattacharya and knowledge coming from Bengal that guided a lot of the works. So West Bengal and Kolkata, I mean, they are known for, the academic scholarship. I think definitely, yeah. Of course, there are other cities. I mean, you have the city of music. Varanasi has, because of its gharanas. The city of gastronomy, Hyderabad, because of its biryani. Srinagar, again, crafts and folk art, which we were putting in an application for. And there are other cities, of course. Chennai is also for music. So it's really to realize your own uniqueness. But if the citizens of Kolkata feel that there is some other aspect that needs to be promoted, then definitely this should be through stakeholder consultation and through involvement of the citizens.
Meanwhile, there's another question that has popped up in the chat box from Anushua Basu. How do you incentivize individual Haveli owners to conserve and maintain their heritage houses?
Yeah, that's a very important question. In fact, in this field workshop that we did from 1st to 9th, we went to various Havelis inside, and we saw that some had taken up, this initiative on their own while they were struggling with issues like, where would they find information about traditional materials and techniques, or the masons, or there were some who did not think it was monetarily viable for them to do it. So that's why we have now come to the conclusion, as per UNESCO recommendations also, that there needs to be a citizen cell and also an exhibition area created in the Nigam. So where citizens can consult, on what material they can use, how they can change their Haveli, how they can reuse it for something else. So there will be technical people who can sit, once a week and give advice on that. So those are the kind of benefits, but also looking at, tax benefits. There is that the tourism department of Rajasthan has already, they have an online application system if you're converting your Haveli into a hotel and you get recognized as a heritage hotel. So that definitely is one. But we also realize that some of them have really done commendable job on their own. So the municipal corporation needs to have like an award, for them. So maybe some categories of awards to celebrate and to recognize what they have achieved would be good.
Well, that's all we have by way of questions in the chat box. I don't think there are any further questions coming. Jantar, in case you have any other questions, can go ahead. Otherwise,
No,
I
I don't think I have any other questions, but it's really an educative process. We have last year on World Tourism Day, we learned many things from the outstanding case of tourism in India, which was from Kerala, and we heard from the Principal Secretary of Tourism in the government of Kerala, who was originally in the Ministry of Culture, Dr. Venu Vasudeva. And we learned so many things from them. And today we have so many things to learn from Jaipur. And it's a template that I think we will have occasion and we will have the opportunity to think through and follow so that we can showcase and we can really work in close collaboration with the various sectors in our creative industries to really showcase our cultural riches to the world. But thank you so much, Dr. Jain, for sort of laying out a pathway for us to try and walk on. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. And I think, soon you may also have some good news for Kolkata and West Bengal with the Shanti Niketan. We will know in another 2 months, but definitely I think you are also achieving a lot of goals. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all of you who joined us for this evening's lecture. I'm sure that all of you who joined in would be unanimous in the opinion that it was an evening very well spent, a lot of food for thought, and a lot of takeaways from this evening's lecture that we had. So thank you very much, Dr. Jain, once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and good night.